Welcome to Vision Chat, a podcast about spiritual topics with your hostesses, Virginia and Stina.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Vision Chat. I'm Virginia, and today we are joined by Natalie Cooney. Natalie is the owner of a group practice of somatic psychotherapists who work with individuals and couples in Colorado. By day, she is a marriage and family therapist, licensed in multiple states, and she consults with people around the world for somatic therapy. As a therapist, she specializes in somatics, sex therapy, psychedelic assisted therapy, attachment, and all things trauma resolution. By night, Natalie has no issue exploring all things spirit related, especially if it involves connection with core organic goodness. I love that. She has trained in body work, integrative nutrition, energy medicine, language of spirit psychic school, astrology, and seminary studies. Natalie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a privilege.
Well, thank you for joining us. So, do you want to add a little bit more to that description? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I think I feel really multifaceted, so it's hard for me to describe it to people. I mean, I feel like my licensure piece is I get to be a therapist and get to sit with people processing pain, and my idea around pain is usually really hard for people because pain is medicine. When we can feel it and we can integrate it, we transform. And as I was getting through like the licensure process, and I've always been like super connected to spiritual stuff and mysticism and all that stuff, and we can talk about that, like that journey. But I think as I've been sitting with people in feeling all their emotions as like a whole being, it has deepened my need for spiritual resource and for it to be connected to spirit. And I think I would not be able to be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have connection to spirit at all. So it's really important to me. And spirit to me is I'm connected through like I love to be out in nature, but all those, all these other practices that I've evolved and grown in throughout, since I was a little girl, they've just added to each other throughout my experience and been super helpful for me to get through life as an individual, but also helping people get through life. Not just get through, but just like actually have, their life force feel alive and good. I'm passionate about that.
There's such a difference between surviving life and then thriving. And if we can get there,
Totally.
like how do we do it? And what do we tap into?
Yes, totally.
So do you call yourself anything? Like, do you, I don't know, connect with any labels like healer, empath, psychic? What are you comfortable with?
I'm comfortable with all of it, even though like I keep myself, like I could call myself a therapist a lot of the time. But I've always connected with being a healer, that like the healing arts, using hands-on healing, like I have been, told and prayed over, and I've experienced it myself, that using my hands and using my own spiritual resources, I tend to lean towards being a healer. Yeah. So I tell people I'm a healer, but a lot of times I just say I'm a therapist. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm naturally seeing where things aren't quite right. And I can naturally see what it's needed to heal it back into its original design, like the goodness original design. Yeah. So I can see that really clearly. And then I can see where people or systems are missing and what needs to be put back in place so that they're in the original goodness of their, the original design of how we were supposed to live and exist, not survive, but just, live and exist.
I'm really curious. I don't know if this is too big of a question, but how do you see it?
See what?
Well, you were talking about seeing how it's supposed to be, like what the original design was. So how do you, I guess, how do you spot it?
I feel it more. I feel where, and I can just talk about it as someone, if I was working with someone or working with a group or, you know, couples or relationships, but I can feel in my system. And I think psychic school really helped me with this because I would feel it and not know what to do with it. And like, I'd be like, what? I'd be so just overwhelmed by the information I was getting. So I feel that either someone or the system, the relationship isn't in a secure, grounded, like rested, easeful place. So I feel that first in my nervous system. I can feel it in my body that something is missing here. Someone isn't feeling safe, or they're not feeling like their core self. And a lot of that comes from when someone's not feeling like they're in their core self, comes from the conditioning that they've received from our culture and their family of origin, a lot of that conditioning. But also traumatic experiences can also take someone out of being in that just grounded, this is who I am, and I'm at peace. I'm at peace with myself. I'm fully accepted myself. I'm embodying my life force to the highest potential that I can. Trauma and conditioning, family conditioning, and cultural, religious trauma conditioning can also remove people's access to that core self. So, and then that impacts people's relationships. And so when I can sense that, that's what I'm sensing. I'm sensing, oh, we're not actually in flow. There's something stopping, thwarting the person or inhibiting the person from being their core self. And so I'm often working in that little silo about like, where can we get a little bit more resiliency and permission, really permission, like for that person to be who they were originally designed to be. You know, if they had unconditional positive regard, who would we become? Who would have we become? You know? Yeah.
Do you find that people usually give you that permission to go there?
No.
I know sometimes, yes. I know people come to therapy and they're like, yes, I want help. I want to change. I want all these things.
Yeah.
And they, you know, and then there's that part that's a little scary because it's like, can we look at it and can we really get to the core? And can we work on changing that? And is there permission to do that?
Yeah. That can, for some people, takes years for me to establish trust with them so that they can actually start the process of giving permission to start finding their core self, because they've been really, life has shown them it is not safe to even go on the journey where someone is even telling them, I'm safe, we're okay, I'm gonna hold this unconditional positive regard. Lots of people, myself included, I can speak from my own experience, is that when people betrayed that trust, that leaves an imprint, so that even if someone pure and loving is sitting across from us saying, it's okay, it's all right, we actually need quite a long, embodied, over and over experience of trusting that person, little tiny bits over time. So that's why it said it can take a long time for people, for their nervous system to actually start opening some windows up, or like cracking the door open, that I could potentially not have to live so armored or so protected or so separate from my life force in order to survive. Because relational trauma when we have early childhood relational trauma, and that can be someone that we just don't have people that have our backs, then we have to have our own back. And it takes quite a long time to peel back those layers. But a lot of time I'm working in that space where I'm not trusted yet. And then we're negotiating a lot around what parts of self are there, what parts of spirit, how can spirit be helpful? I feel like spirituality is incredibly helpful for some people, and it's super loaded for other people. So that's why it's like having, lots of toolbox, lots of things in the toolbox. Mm-hmm.
I love that you're using your spirituality though to with people and integrate it into the therapy that you're doing. How did you get into spirituality?
Yeah, so I was raised in a Christian culture and by Christian parents. And however, I really think I got the version of Christianity in some ways that was very mystical. So kind of believing in spirit and angels and healing, gifts that could, I can pray, and prayer is going to heal somebody. Like those types of spiritual, mystical, how I think like Jesus really was. So I got that, but I also, once I kind of got out into like Christian culture outside of that mysticism, I was shocked to hear how legalistic and non-mystical and like how non-divine it, like how really the patriarchy has removed the mystical and removed feminine emotion, feminine sexuality, right? Like the removal of all of that mysticism. I really didn't get to see a lot of that until later when I was doing biblical studies, that I was like, oh, I actually got the version of Christianity that felt like very like Jesus mystically. But that's one, it's like I had this while I was experiencing my childhood, where we like also had like a lot of like Celtic mystical like influence as well, and just a lot of openness. I feel like I feel really privileged that I got a lot of openness. And it's really sad to see Christianity now being incredibly shut down to mysticism and, the healing arts. So, but actually the things that I feel like really opened me up was my traumas that I had in my life. So, and I just kind of have like a theory that the trauma kind of kicks the door open for some people. It breaks open how we saw the world and our belief systems. And once that breaks open, you can't go back to seeing it the way that it was. And my childhood experiences and, getting into my adolescence was like, I feel like those traumas, I had to connect to spirit. There was no other, like my dog. There was no other option.
I thought it was a ghost. I heard a voice. I'm like, spirit is speaking.
Spirit is speaking. Yes. So this is why I said pain is medicine, because I feel like pain cracked me open to start seeing spirit as way bigger, way bigger than what, Big C church was teaching me, even though I had from a young age had very, very spiritual experiences where I was seeing spirits and experience, like I was just overwhelmed by it. I didn't know what was happening. I was sensing and picking up on it all the time. I mean, my whole family was just like, what? She just has an anxiety disorder. That's why I like really reclaiming it for people. It's like, actually, like the anxiety is because you're picking up, you're like tuned at a higher frequency. So how can we help you with that and like actually learn some tools? But so the pain actually started to break some of that open, and I was connecting to God, spirit, cosmos. Like it was so easy for me. is so easy for me. And so then I just like, and even my self-reflection of journaling and then learning yoga and, you know, still being involved in like Big C church, but I felt like I was feeling the unconditional positive regard that is very disconnected for people, that like so many people don't have that as a feeling. And I felt that. I've always felt that. Always felt it. And I think it's just like easy for me to tap into. So I think I just started exploring and I just let myself explore. And because I have this deep sense of like, this is just God, cosmos, or spirit, and people are just trying to put it in different boxes. So silly. It makes me laugh thinking about how people are putting it in boxes, because you just can't. I have always felt comfortable exploring and just letting myself explore, more so really after I did my biblical studies, getting my master's in marriage and family therapy. Part of it was with some biblical stuff, and I was floored by the amount of how mysticism was taken out and how spirituality was taken out. But I was already doing body work and massage and learned Reiki and, you know, all this. I was doing all this stuff while I was still having a foot in the church door. But I was letting myself explore, and just, I've always felt like I wanted to know more, because I was experiencing so much, so much in my nervous system. And when I would be around people, even just thinking about people, I'd be getting downloads all the time. Yeah. And so I think that's when I started to really, really give myself the permission. After I did the biblical piece, I just was like, I really don't need, I don't need to put any of this in boxes. Like, it's all connected. So then I just went to psychic school, and then I went to astrology school, and then I just let myself do these things. And I think some people would think I think of some of my clients who are Christian, and they're scared of these ideas. For me, it's all about expanded consciousness. That if we have more connection to learning about ourselves, then we have a super speedway to getting into connection with love. So for me, expanded consciousness is just learning more about love, which is me and you and other people, or they're not. We're seeing that now in our world. Is like there's a lot of people that are disconnected from that love, and that's all trauma. It's all trauma that we've needed to disconnect from love. But my spiritual explorations, the intention behind it is not to, go off and be this weird woo-woo person. It's really just so I have more expanded consciousness about why we're here and who I am supposed to be. And that is, I think I'm supposed to be connected to love. And that's me and spirit. So lots of.
I think you just solved all the world's problems. I mean,
if everyone thought that way, that'd be great.
My goodness, right. I mean, what a journey, and how brave of you to be able to explore all these things and to let yourself explore, because I think that that's one of the things that keeps a lot of people stuck in boxes. It's like, well, I have these rules and I have to follow these rules and I have to stay within the box. And if I go outside of it, then what's going to happen? Chaos. Well, what if you find peace instead of chaos, if you let yourself explore?
Yeah, which most people do when they go into the disorganized and the deconstruction. It is chaos initially, but on the other side of that, so I think that's where psychedelics comes in as well, is that expanded consciousness piece helps people connect to their, it helps them go through the pain, right? To go through the pain to find more of who they really are. And a lot of people, when they let themselves explore outside those boxes, like you were saying, Virginia, there's fear, like the contemporary culture, there's quite a lot of fear around exploring outside, and religion, you know, a lot of religion does this too. It's like, oh my gosh, you're, you know, giving a foothold for the devil. And like I didn't get that. I didn't, and that's why like I feel so privileged, because I didn't get that. It was just like, oh yeah, God is in everything, and we're gonna just keep exploring. But there's quite a lot of fear. But once people get outside of that box and they start deconstructing, it's terrifying and it's disorganizing. But that disorganization is for our service. It gives us, we need disorganization to reorganize at a higher level. That's just what happens. Like when we go through pain, it shatters us. And when we come back together, we're more pure us. So I'm glad that I just feel lucky that I have given myself the permission to go outside those boxes. And I think it helps people when I'm sitting with them, with the people that are my Christian clients that are, you know, in those boxes. It works for them, and I can connect to that and love that, and help them find love in that box as well. There's no, you know, right or wrong to which path you choose. I've needed to see all the boxes and more boxes, so that I can make sense of pain, really.
What do you think is like the biggest misconception about spirituality? Is it that, you know, like if the religious piece, like if there are certain rules within a religion, if you break out of those, then something bad's going to happen. You're going to not such a good place afterwards, or
yeah, it's along those lines for sure. I think one of the biggest misconception, at least in the communities that I'm serving, is that there needs to be fear. That like fear, like that we need to be afraid of spirituality. And I don't think that, but I think that is something that has been really conditioned into a lot of people to be afraid. And that and then those other things you said, like that if you do that, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen to you, or, you know, that there's negative consequences. And I think that it just feeds back to the fear piece. Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with control. I think that there's quite a lot of control in that cycle. I say it in relationships all the time. If you have to use fear to try to get your partner to change, but I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work. So it's just I think it's an outdated religious tactic, yeah, to use fear to get people to, you know, to change or to be a certain way. I think it's a big misconception. Yeah, because once you do explore anything that expands your consciousness, whether it's astrology or psychedelics or, you know, psychic school or tarot or reading the Bible or any sort of spiritual scripture, like all of that is for us to self-reflect and to become free. So I see it as just like me exercising that freedom, which I think is love given to me, is to be free. It's like, yeah, I feel like it's just hard to describe.
Isn't that what we all want though? Like that freedom
Yes.
and love? Who doesn't want that?
Right. People are so scared of it because what would that mean? It means they don't have the framework that has, you know, been the architecture, the filter system that they've seen everything through. So once you remove that filter system, the bumper rails are off, but the bumper rails are actually hurting people. That's the reality, is that if we stay in those boxes, for some people, those boxes are really, really kind. And so when it's grounded in love and kindness, it's life-saving. Totally. But when those boxes are about fear and shame, it's so destructive to the core self. I mean, I don't think the core self can ever be destroyed, but it makes the core self go farther and farther underground. And
I
then people get symptoms when that happens.
always tell people, like, if it works for you, do it. You know, like if you believe in something, whatever it is, if it works for you, that's great. Question it if it's not working for you. Explore
As
other
long as you're not hurting somebody, right?
yeah.
Or hurting yourself.
Hurting yourself or other people. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why
not?
What advice would you give people who are exploring spirituality, like for the first time, or want to look into it more? Like, are there things that you, like, now looking back on your own journey, are there things you would recommend?
I would recommend that for someone that is wanting to explore, to listen to the impulse or the intuition or the curiosity. If you are walking by a shop or you're in the library and you see an interesting book, and instead of like shutting it down and saying like, no, I can't do that, listening to the instinct or the pull, like you hear, I'm sure you guys hear this all the time, like this, just like, oh, one day I just like, oh, I'm gonna look that up. And it's just like sometimes that little tiny, and it changes everything for people. So that moment when people shut that down and they're like, nope, right? Nope, I can't. I would say like, what if like one of those, you just like, just looked over just a little bit, because the pull is there. The pull is there for everybody. I think. Like, I think we're all super connected. We were designed that way and we were conditioned to shut it down. So it's always there. So that's what I would say. I would say, like, if you feel a pull, like, even if it feels super silly that you're like reading about like how the trees talk to one another, like maybe just like let it see, just like open the book and see, because it's always there.
I love it, because actually feeling that little pull is what it's like. It led me to all of this up to this point, and it's been so incredible. Just a little curiosity about, I wonder what it would be like if I just took some classes. You know, let me learn
Is
how
that
to
your first
meditate.
pull?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my
It
God.
was actually, it was even before that. It was just like, it's like a domino effect.
It
You know,
is.
there were little pools all along the way, so small that now looking back, I'm like, wow. You know, like I followed my I heard another podcast, and there was a lady on there who was talking about being a therapist and a psychic, and I was like, wow, what if I connected with her?
Yeah.
I mean, she might not even answer my email, but what if she does?
And
And she did. And then we got to talking, and then one thing led to another. And I'm like, well, what if I take some classes and learn how to meditate? And then I'm in psychic school. And now there's all
right.
this information, and it's so awesome.
It is like a domino effect. I think you saying that word, just like it, I felt that land so in me. One little, yeah. And that's the shame and the sadness when people are stuck in the boxes, because they are trained to disregard that little pull. So I just feel like we're both privileged that we got to feel that, and we gave ourselves enough permission to just like, okay, well, I'm gonna look it up, and then I'm gonna see, I'm gonna
And just do it and see where
and
it
just
takes
do
you.
it.
And it's
Yeah.
never gone wrong. That's the other amazing, incredible thing, that it's never have I ever looked back and said, wow, I wish I hadn't taken that class, or I wish I hadn't done that. It's always led to good places. The journey hasn't always been easy, but the reward has been incredible.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I have, and I'm sure you do too, so many stories and experiences of, if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have been able to, for me, have my heart open to this person or this experience or this thing that happened in my life, which I think having an open heart and being, seeing through the eye of the heart, for me, that's part of my original design. And so if I had stayed in the boxes, I would have had so much, I would have experienced the pain and suffering from a victim place. And like, God, oh God, why is this happening? You know? And instead, I was able to, oh, this is happening and I can feel all of it because I'm present to it, because I've got spirit I'm totally connected, and it's the worst pain I've ever experienced. But my heart is open and it's literally changing me. Because I don't have to come up with a narrative about like, oh, maybe because I did this and maybe because no, it's just because life is painful sometimes. And for some people, a lot of the time. And spirit allows us to stay open to the transformational nature of pain, suffering. Not that pain and suffering is to transform us. There's just an opportunity in pain and suffering for us to become more empathetic, more in our heart spaces, more attuned to loving kindness for ourselves and others. Like, why not?
Do you think there will ever be an existence where we can learn through love and joy instead of the pain and suffering? Because I don't know about you, I'm over the pain and suffering.
Right?
I don't want to do it anymore. Please, no more.
Well, here's the thing that I've experienced, particularly with psychedelics, is that on some plane of existence, that's already happening. And so for some reason, we're having this lived experience here, to however you want, searching for me, like man's search for meaning is like a big deal. We always make meaning out of what we're going through. But yeah, it's like it becomes like this big opening as I think about it, is the reality that, oh, it's so hard to describe, but like I feel that secure attachment is, there's always loving kindness and safety on some plane of existence. So it is, to me, an function of our physical nature that we feel separation from love, because people do terrible things and hurt people, and we see that tons. But there is, on some plane of existence, this space of safety and connection where there isn't pain. And I think some people call that heaven. And I think it's just on another plane of existence. And I can tap into it whenever I want.
That's awesome, because I want to go there.
Right.
How do we get there?
Yeah. And I think the only way I could have had an embodied experience of that is if I went through my trauma work. Like, trauma work, going through that allowed me to experience that. The people that I've lost, my brother, my dad, traumatic losses, I am connected to them, and that's it. And they're not in pain. And somewhere I'm also not in pain. This quantum version of me, or the me that knows, that has more information than my physical me knows. Because the physical has experienced a lot, and it's hard for us to make sense of that. But yeah, I think it was only through the pain that I could tap into. It's like, oh no, we're actually connected, and there isn't pain in that connection.
Well, for people that are listening, and I think our target audience are, when we started this podcast, are people exploring spirituality maybe for the first time, or having some curiosity about it.
Oh, cool.
So for people that, are like, well, how do you tap into spirit? How do you do that? How do you go about that? What practices do you use to tap into that?
Mm-hmm. I think my journey, so I would say some people can sense it in their systems. Majority of people need external experiences of it first, to create that access point. So I also think when we are at peace with our life force, our life energy, that is spirit, which is intuitive and empathic and beyond time and space. But I think initially people have to explore probably some external pieces and then feel what it feels like in their body or in their spirit. Like for me, nature, I think, is a super speedway. Yeah, I just think it's a super speedway. And for a lot of people, I think that's why our earth and the collective archetype now is there's quite a lot of pain because there's a deep connection or deep disconnection from earth and nature and just being outside and not on our phones outside, right? Being outside and just like sensing into nature is, I think, a really a way to start cultivating it. And I think cultivation is the appropriate word to normalize for people, is that it's going to start super small and it will feel like an itty bitty tiny inkling, like we were talking about before, little tiny something. And as we give time and attention to that, it's going to cultivate it and be more accessible. It's just like secure attachment. When we cultivate secure attachment with ourselves, the more we do that, when we cultivate pleasure, sexual pleasure, when we practice sexual pleasure more often, that feeds and builds access to those things. So this concept of cultivation and feeding, what you feed is going to grow. And so I think nature, I think reading spiritual texts of any sort, like really just letting yourself go to the library or go to a bookstore and just let yourself sit on the aisle and just pull out books and just like, oh, I wonder, seeing how that lands for you. Books, I think, I think they're incredible. Like how people just write and put books out just blows my mind. I think it can be in everything. I'm like thinking about like music and incense and like even just lighting a candle. I did that for a long time, especially when I was doing the biblical studies, where I was just getting such a disconnect of like, oh my gosh, what are all these men talking about that women can't preach? And what? Like, I'm so confused here. Like, I was lighting a candle to like ritualize that, like, no, spirit is still here. Like spirit is here. And so I was doing that, and ritual, like having morning or afternoon rituals, or having an altar space where you have items that, lost loved ones, like those are your ancestors that are helping you, if they're benevolent. And I think there's just like a lot of ways that you can start playing with it, but have it be like play, less of like it's a job or I have to, like, there's fear here, but just like seeing if you can let your little inner child come out and just play. People find it in art and just starting to paint, or I think it's in everything. Movement, music, touch, sex. Oh, yeah. I think you can I think it's quite disconnected for people, though. Like a lot of people can do all of those things and not feel spirit. So I always invite people, when you're doing that thing that makes you feel good, can you pause and drop into your physical experience, to your lived experience, and get a sense of the color, the texture of something that's residing in you that is emboldening you to be vibrating at a higher vibration. Like lack of better words for that, but that's what it feels like. You're like there's something vibrating within you. And I think you can find it in so many things. Yeah. So many things, but it has to be cultivated.
You're so right. In like, I think a lot of people engage in those things and they're probably like, yeah, but I go for a walk all the time, or all the time. But it's like, but how intentional are you being with it too? Like, how much fun are you having? Like, are you leaving your phone at home? Or like, are you scrolling while you're, in the woods and you're like, that didn't help at all.
And are you taking selfies of yourself when you're in the woods, right?
And posting it, I'm in the woods.
Right? Yes. Look I'm in the woods. But it's like, oh, I'm going to make a pot of tea. And in that pot of tea, you know, you find, oh, I'm going to do this herb and this herb. And like suddenly you're doing magic and
Yeah.
you're having a cup of freaking tea. Oh my gosh. And people are having tea all the time. But that moment can be, oh, but there's a word for it. It's like, it can be a transcendent, but embodied. You can be transcendent. You can have this magical experience, but be healing your body at the same time. Like that is what tapping into spirit does. It can heal you when you're having a freaking cup of tea and it's magic, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I think it is a shift or an invitation for our people to look at it that way. It's like a perspective. That's what I meant by the window or the windshield. It's like if our windshield is like, I just need to survive and I shouldn't see anything as magical or mystical, that's how you're going to see it. So, but what if we cleaned off the windshield and just saw you're having a cup of tea, you're lighting a candle as a religious experience of meeting cosmic, unconditional, loving power or something, you know, whatever you want to call it, or yourself, you know?
Yes. Natalie, how can people find you? Do you want to be found?
I kind of want to be found.
Nice. Okay. How do they connect with you? What do you like to offer? How do they find you?
Oh my gosh. So I'm kind of in a transition right now. I have my group practice, which is all licensed therapists. So they are incredible. That's at compasshealingproject.com. If you're in Colorado and you're like, I want someone that can do deep somatic work, please, please, please seek us out. Like therapy is significantly less scarier than it was 5 years ago. And like these people in particular make it even less scary for people. You get to meet with real people. I got my toes in a lot of things. And right now my licensed work is full. I'm full. But I do quite a lot of consultations, exploring things that, you know, they wouldn't be someone becoming my client right now for a period of time, but I am doing still these other pieces that are disconnected from my licensure. So you can still find me. I'm not set up on different platforms or another website. It's still quite underground, I should say, because my licensure really doesn't, I'm not really, you know, I'm not going to put any of this spiritual pressure onto people, and I'm not allowed to. But it is something that people do tend to find me and are really like deconstructing their old belief systems and wanting the permission and the safety of someone that has been in lots of worlds to hold their process. And I love, love, love that work. So you can still find people can connect to me through my Compass Healing Project website. I am in the process of getting something that's separate from my licensure going, because I've got all these other pieces that are so life-giving for me, in addition to my work as a licensed therapist. So,
well, beautiful. Thank you so much. And thanks for being
thanks
with
for
us
having
today.
me. Thank you so much for having me. It was so nice to talk with you, Virginia.